Good evening, beautiful souls. This spirit has wanted me to do a video on the Black Lives Matter thing or movement for quite some time, and I've been urged to do it now. So, yeah, basically I'm going to start off with Spirit wants everyone who sees this to know that Black Lives Matter, and it's kind of like an obvious statement. However, I need to acknowledge that there is systemic racism, not only in America, but also in other parts of the world, like Australia and, the UK, from what I've looked at online. And there are some great videos that SBS has put up. SBS is the special broadcasting service in Australia. So I'll put the links in the description below for that, because they've got a whole Black Lives Matter documentary section, which I found really, really good. And this is a heavy topic, which I think is why it's taken me so long to actually get to it. And it doesn't affect me directly. Like, I'm not out there every day getting microaggressions from people who say they aren't racist and yet say, oh, immigration needs to stop and stuff like that. So, I'm coming from a privileged perspective. So, yeah, and racism is on all levels of society, at least here in Australia. It's ingrained in the government. It's, you turn on TV shows and the bad guy in the TV show is a black man, which when that happens, and when I see that on a TV show, I deliberately stop watching the TV show. Even if it's a really great story, I just don't watch it. There are other ways of telling a story, a great story, without implying that black people are bad and people of colour are bad and, the white saviour and all of that stuff. And I wanted to talk about racism in Australia. So the genocide against the Aboriginal people, happened. Like, the English invaded and killed a lot of Aboriginal people, and especially in Tasmania, because I know a bit more about Tasmania because I'm descended from Tasmanian Aboriginals. And like in Tasmania, there was genocide on the Tasmanian Aboriginal people, to the point where there was no like full-blooded, Tasmanian Aboriginal people. It was all kind of bred out. So in WA, Western Australia, there was this like, I think this is another reason why I struggled with this video for so long, because there is just so much information about how Australia has treated Aboriginal people. They were used as slaves. They were, bred out where, as I was saying, before, there was this campaign to marry an Aboriginal, for white men to marry an Aboriginal woman so that their child would be lighter skinned. And then the next generation down, so 3 generations on, the black skin of Aboriginal people would be gone completely. So it would they would breed out the Aboriginal yeah. Anyway, so there's a lot, like, there is so much around that I want to rant about, that I want to say, but I also want to give like an overall lesson in what else has happened in Australia. So we've had the stolen generations of Aboriginal people. So those people, the Aboriginal people who married and fell in love with a white person, they had lighter-skinned children. And those lighter-skinned children were abducted by the government and placed into, missionary camps where they were taught white English principles, and just, made them forget their language, their heritage, their connection to the land. And there's a really great movie called The Rabbit Fence. I'll have to check that one. Where there's this fence between Western Australia and the rest of the eastern kind of half, not quite half of Australia, but eastern 2/3 of Australia. And they put up a fence, rabbit-proof fence, that's what it was called, the title of the movie. And it was, they put that fence up originally to stop the spread of rabbits, because they're an invasive species in Australia. So they put that up to stop the spread of rabbits going to WA. And this movie was all about, the government abducting the children of Aboriginal people and putting them into these camps, and how horrible that was. And not only that, they weren't just put into these camps. They were also adopted out to childless couples from Europe. And there are so many stories of children growing up, they think they're white, and, finding out at 20, 25 or something like that, that they were actually taken from their Aboriginal parents, and there was no reason for that other than the fact that the government said so. And so they have this really painful, time to reconcile the fact that they love their white adoptive parents, but at the same time, they're like, well, what about my Aboriginal parents? Like, yeah, it's just this really difficult experience of, reconciling the fact that they were taken from their Aboriginal family and placed in this loving and caring white European family, but that still doesn't mean that they're okay with it. Yes, they still love their white parents, but, they would have liked to have known their Aboriginal parents. Anyway, so there's so much going on, and it's got like intergenerational trauma and all of that stuff. And yes, so basically what I'm trying to say is the Aboriginal people of Australia, they have had, the government, all forms of society, all layers of society have kind of marginalized them and left them in poverty, and made it so that there are so many issues that they need to work out. And it's really difficult, because how are they supposed to work it out when they don't have a recognition? Okay, so in 2008, the Prime Minister at the time, Kevin Rudd, he apologised to the stolen generations of Australia. And wow, this has gone on for 9 minutes, 10 minutes. So there was that recognition that there was wrongdoing, but that was like 50 years in the making. And every other Prime Minister of Australia has said, no, we're not going to apologise because then we have to acknowledge that we did something bad. And we don't want to acknowledge that. So finally, it got acknowledged in 2008. But that was, like I said, 50 years too late. And the amount of damage that has been done to the Aboriginal people over that time, ever since the English invaded, or colonised Australia, there has just been so much damage that has gone dismissed by the English government, the Australian government as well. It's just been pushed aside. They do say, yes, where, bad stuff happened, but just the other day, our Prime Minister said, oh, slavery, we don't have slavery. Australia has never had slavery. And the Aboriginal people were like, excuse me, don't just deny our history. And that's it. There has been so much denial of Aboriginal history, of Aboriginal stories, of Aboriginal culture. And, to the point, yeah. So that was like, I have so much, I want to rant about this. I really do. But this is not the place to rant. Other than to say, I guess, yes, racism sucks. The patriarchal white society does have a lot of ingrained racism in it. And there is a lot of benefit that the patriarchal white society has off that race, from that racism. Like, they use it to help themselves, to further themselves, to, all of that stuff, to give themselves privilege that people of colour don't have. So, yes, and it's happened all throughout history. So, like I said, I'm coming from an Australian perspective and not from an American perspective where, the African American slavery that happened. So I just want to let you know that's the perspective I'm coming from, and I'm not saying that I know what African American people are going through. I'm not saying that I know what Aboriginal people are going through. I'm saying that I kind of know what some Aboriginal people are going through, especially my mob in Tasmania. But yeah, well, I know some of it. I'm not saying that I know everything. And yes, so I just want to say that I acknowledge racism exists, and I do try to challenge it when I see it. I do try to challenge it in a safe way for me and for others. And yeah, I have donated to the Black Lives Matter movement, and like I said, I've got links, or I've got a link at least, to the many documentaries that SBS has provided for the Black Lives Matter movement. So if you want to educate yourself further, go check out that link. I think you do need to be in Australia, like geographically in Australia. So, get out your VPN and join an Australian server so you can have a look at that if you are from another country. But yeah, so have a look at that. And anyway, I am going to get on with it because, like, I have ranted. So, Spirit, what do you want to say about the Black Lives Matter movement? Okay, so what's this? Oh, here we go. Okay. So, when I did the reading a few weeks ago where Spirit was basically told me, Jessie, you need to do a Black Lives Matter reading, Spirit basically was talking about how the Black Lives Matter, the society that we're in, you know, with the COVID-19, that's allowed people to really look at what part of society they want to change that is no longer acceptable. And, you know, police brutality against people of colour has never been acceptable. In Australia, in I think 95, we had a royal commission into Aboriginal deaths in police custody. And I don't think anything actually came out of that. It was just a royal commission investigating it, and the recommendations went ignored. And that's kind of, you know, typical of the Australian government, how the Australian government treats the Aboriginal people. It's their stories go ignored. And yes, unfortunately, there is still Aboriginal deaths in police custody. Anyway, so yes. So with COVID-19, it's allowed us to have this time to think and consider what needs to be changed in society. And obviously, the racism needs to end, you know, and not just become more subtle as it has, you know, going from overt to covert, like the expressions of, or the microaggressions against people of colour. It needs to end completely. So, yeah, here we've got Queen of Swords and the Ten of Swords. So this is kind of, to me, saying that, like, normally the Queen of Swords is very compassionate and kind, but this one is like, nah, I've had enough. Enough is enough. Like, you know, she is pissed off. And rightly so. You know, she's had the final straw has been, you know, has broken the camel's back, and she's just fed up with it. You know, she doesn't, she's not going to have any more of this. And she's ready to fight for equality and for the end of racism. And this is, you know, the Ten of Swords upside down or reversed. You know, that's kind of just saying, you know, she's had enough of people getting pinned down, quite literally, and she's not going to take it anymore. And, you know, the Ten of Swords in reverse typically means that the swords are going to fall out of the person. If I had, you know, a handy dandy tarot here's what I prepared earlier, you could probably see this better, but I will show it like this. So there she is. So this is the person stuck to the wall with the Ten of Swords. And when it's upside down, the Ten of Swords, they fall out of this person. So it's like, it's a completion of a cycle, and it's, you know, the end. It's like there is no further that you can go below this, is what the Ten of Swords generally says when it's upright. But when it's reversed, it's like, well, you've gotten as far as you can go now, you know, as low as you can get, and now things are turning up for the better, and the swords are being, you know, cast out. And that's kind of what this suggests to me. Like, she is not going to wait for the government to change its mind about racism. She is not going to wait for the police to stop targeting people of colour, and especially black people. She is not going to wait for society to catch up, to become woke. She is, you know, she's had enough, and she's going to make it so that society hears her and recognises that enough is enough. So here we've got the King of Swords reversed, we've got the Knight of Wands, the Eight of Wands, and Temperance. So to me, this is kind of suggesting like there is going to be fast movement with this, you know, enough is enough. You know, people are on a mission now. It's not just people of colour and African American people who are taking up this call. It's worldwide again, and it has been worldwide in the past, but now I feel like it's, you know, that was a step, and this is, it's finally picking up speed. It's picking up inertia, this Black Lives Matter movement. And people aren't going to let this go. And to me, this, you know, this King of Swords reversed, to me, he kind of represents almost like, dare I say, the government, because he's really patriarchal. He's definitely white, and yeah, in Australia, we have a tendency to call our white male politicians dinosaurs, because they live in like, they're living in a completely different century. And yeah, I feel like this is, you know, an old dinosaur. Everyone is seeing him for, or the government, for the dinosaur that they have become. And it's time to turn it on its head and, yeah, not accept the slow-moving, T-Rex that's just going to go around eating everything it can, or eating everyone who's marginalised. You know, people are going to, they're going to fight. And when I say fight, I don't mean like physically fight. I mean like, you know, protest and make sure that the government listens to them. And this temperance here kind of suggests it's going to be a sustained effort. It's not going to fade away like it did, I think in 2013 when the movement first started. So, or at least in this, century. So it's not going to fade away. It's not going to go out of the mainstream consciousness. It's going to stay there. And, things will change. And so here we've got the Knight of Cups, the Six of Cups reversed, the Ten of Cups reversed, and the Hermit. So the Knight of Cups to me suggests that people are going to have a lot more empathy for the movement, for people of colour, and, empathy and understanding and, just compassion as well for those who have been marginalised and targeted and, are on the receiving end of racism on a daily basis. So I feel like society is going to definitely support and try to make equality and equity a thing that everyone receives, not just, the mainstream white people. And here we've got the Six of Cups, which is all about sharing. And so I feel like, okay, so let's see if we can grab this. So I don't know if you can see it, but see how she's got 2 cups here and a 3rd cup there, and this person has only 1 cup. This feels to me like they're making it so that this person can have, and it's a small cup. So this person is sharing the wealth, kind of sharing, making it more equitable for people who need the assistance, and for marginalised people. So it's going to be a more equitable society, and, ensuring that people who need help will receive the help that they need. So that's what this says to me. And then we've got the Ten of Cups, which is, happy families. And that's kind of, what we're aiming for. With this sharing of resources, we're aiming for everyone to be, on a level playing field and happy and able to enjoy their life and not worry about police brutality or police shootings or police storming into their houses and and shooting them while they're on their own property in their own houses. And it also reminds me of something else I watched on YouTube. There was this lady, she was talking about how she served, I think, in the Coast Guard, and she's paying taxes for the police, and it's a really screwed up system because she's paying taxes for police to protect her, but what the police are doing, they are targeting her. So in effect, she's paying so that the police will target her, and it's just that is just so wrong on so many levels. I will link that video in the description below so that you can understand what I'm talking about. But it's just like, I have so many words and they all want to come out at the same time. And I'm just so, angry on behalf of people who are targeted like this. And yeah, sorry. Anyway, and that's the thing. It's not just African Americans. It's also Australian Aboriginal people. It's also, people of colour all over the world who are being targeted because of racism. So, and I was watching a video the other day where there was this lady, she was talking about how if she doesn't stand up for her rights and black people's rights, then who will? And that's where, that's, like, that is just so messed up. We're all a human family, and, spirit is behind the Black Lives Matter movement. So and it's not just we should support these people because, or the movement because spirit tells us to. We should support the movement because it's the decent thing to do. Anyway, I will get back to this. So here we go. And up here we've got the hermit. And, in this respect, the hermit typically represents talking to your higher self and getting knowledge and like learnings and following your higher self's direction in life. And this to me, after that rant that I did, is kind of saying, look, don't believe me that Black Lives Matter. Don't believe, someone else on YouTube. Don't believe a random person, because that's what I am. I'm a random person. Believe black people when they say Black Lives Matter. Of course, do that. But also, focus on what your higher self has to say about this. Is your higher self saying, hey, this is an issue, it needs to be dealt with? Stand with the Black Lives Matter movement. Be an ally. If your higher self is saying that, then, believe it and act accordingly. And yes, so I feel like I'm going to end this here, even though I've got, all these other oracle cards waiting for me. This is, I could rant forever about this subject, and that is why I think it is best if I end this here. So, just to summarize, TLDR or TLDW, believe people's stories, like, African American stories, African American people, when they say there is police brutality and they are targeting black people. Believe the movement. This movement matters. Stand with the Black Lives Matter movement, and ultimately check in with your higher self to see what you can do about this situation, how you can help. And yes, there's obviously donating, there's educating yourself, educating others, There's going out to the protests safely. COVID-19 is still a thing. So, yeah, do what you can to ensure that racism is no longer an issue, and that the government and all levels of society recognise that Black Lives Matter. So, thank you very much. Have a good night. Yes. I hope this finds you well. Many blessings. Good evening, beautiful souls. This spirit has wanted me to do a video